take a close look at this forest. What you see is just a forest. Just trees, all shapes, all sizes. You're looking at a forest the way you always have, the way most people look at a forest. But by the time you finish watching the important techniques this video demonstrates, this forest will never look the same to you again. These trees, their size, shape, and species are going to take on a new significance. That's because you'll learn to see these trees through the eyes of an experienced professional spacer. It's a crucial difference because it will enable you to make informed choices about which tree to keep and which tree to cut. That's the secret to effective spacing. This video concentrates on the first spacing period, the juvenile spacing, when trees in a juvenile stage of growth, between 8 and 20 years of age, are removed. It will also help you learn much more than just how to make those important spacing choices. There are 9 parts in this program. Part 1 will examine the important role you, as a professional spacer, play in the creation of a managed forest. Seeing the benefits of spacing will give you a better appreciation of the work you'll do and help you understand why the choices you'll make are so important. These benefits are outlined in Part 2. In Part 3, you'll learn the most important components of the 2 power saws you'll be using the most, the chainsaw and the brush saw, and how they work. In Part 4, you'll see how to do the job safely through the safe handling of those tools, by wearing the proper safety clothes and by using the correct safety equipment. In Part 5, we'll discuss who you work for, the members of the forest management team and their responsibilities to you and to the forest. What makes a good tree? This question is answered in Part 6, along with an overview of some of the province's most important crop tree species and the telltale signs of disease and damage that may threaten them. In Part 7, you'll learn step by step how to decide which trees to keep and which trees to cut. In Part 8, you'll see spacing crews demonstrate how they do their job. They'll show you how to do it efficiently and effectively by using the right tools the right way. Part 9 examines the quality inspection procedure and its importance to the forest and to individual spacers like yourself. You'll learn how to check the quality of your work to ensure a proper job is being done. This video will connect many of the lessons you've already covered in learning about juvenile spacing. You should have been introduced to basic power saw skills, survival first aid, and basic tree identification. This program will demonstrate how to do your job properly and will provide some tips that will make your work easier, faster, and safer. It's not intended as the sole source of training information on juvenile spacing. In many cases, only the most important components have been included. There's no substitute for further study of training aids, hands-on experience, and questions you pose to your supervisor. In fact, this series has been designed to help you identify the areas in which you'll need further information or assistance. Remember, in a very real way, it's you who shape our future forests. Let's see how you, as a professional spacer, will do the job. A forest resource is like the product of many different specialized activities that take place over an extended period of time. Seeds are collected and carefully sorted and prepared at seed centers. The seedlings are carefully nurtured in nurseries. Forest sites are prepared, and the young trees are planted. The goal? Trees that mature earlier and yield better quality logs than trees left to grow on their own. As a professional spacer, you play an important role in reaching that goal. From seedling to sapling, many variables can affect a tree's condition and vary survival. The rate of loss can be high. That's why so many natural areas have an overabundance of seedlings. We also compensate for possible losses on site, which are planted by hand. More trees are used than are actually required. Having additional trees allows the best saplings to be left and those of low quality to be removed once the stand reaches a juvenile stage. Seedlings grow rapidly because their need grows, so does its needs. A site which easily supplies the needs of thousands of seedlings may only support hundreds of saplings and even fewer mature trees. Trees grow at different rates. Here's why. This is the tree's crown, composed of foliage. The amount of foliage in the crown largely determines how fast that tree will grow. The foliage is like a factory, converting light, air, water, and nutrients into wood. While many factors affect a tree's wood production, generally speaking, the larger the crown, the more wood the tree may produce. Every tree is in competition with every other tree. Each one tries to occupy as much area as possible and to eventually overtop and shade out its neighbor. As the crowns close and the branches of neighboring trees touch, lower branches become shaded out. The size of the factory is reduced, and natural mortality occurs as smaller trees can't get the sunshine they require. The remaining trees benefit from reduced competition for sunlight, water, and nutrients. This is a natural type of thinning. The additional space provided allows maximum growing opportunity for the trees left on site. The forest manager's goal is a healthy, fast-growing stand. To achieve that goal, the factories of individual trees must be as big as possible. That means the forest manager must prevent the lower branches of desirable trees from being shaded out. The solution? Control the time when thinning or spacing occurs. Ideally, where economically feasible, spacing or thinning should take place several times before the stand reaches maturity. Spacing activities often include sanitation thinning, the removal of diseased and damaged trees, improvement cutting, the elimination of poorly formed trees, and crop release, the removal of unwanted trees which block sunlight to trees such as this one. It's called a crop tree, a tree with desirable qualities. It will remain on site through to stand maturity. Juvenile spacing activities set the stage for other silviculture activities, such as pruning, fertilization, and commercial thinning. Juvenile spacing is sometimes referred to as pre-commercial thinning, because the trees which are removed have traditionally been too small to be sold as a commercial product. Commercial thinnings, carried out later in the life of the stand, remove trees large enough to be sold as saw logs or for other commercial uses. Let's review the main points of Part 1, the role you play. The goal of a professional spacer is to ensure there's enough growing space to maximize the size of a tree's crown, so the stage is set for future silviculture activities. As reliance on second-growth timber grows, the importance of silviculture activities such as juvenile spacing increases. As a member of a spacing crew, your decisions will help shape the forests of BC for future generations. Every tree that's removed means that moisture, sunlight, and the nutrients in the ground will be used by the remaining trees, the highest quality and fastest growing trees in the stand. The forest is like a vegetable garden. The smallest plants are removed to allow the rest to grow and mature more rapidly. After spacing, more nutrients, moisture, and sunlight can reach the remaining trees, increasing their growth rate. This has the important effect of actually reducing the time required for a stand to reach maturity. When undertaken with other silviculture activities, spacing helps develop trees that are uniform in size and shape. Trees like these, in a stand that's been spaced and pruned. When harvested, these trees will produce logs which have the same characteristics: high-quality, uniform size. Compare a log cross-section from an unspaced stand with a cross-section from a spaced stand. The growth rings are much larger from the spaced stand. These stands will yield larger logs and, in turn, reduce logging and sawmilling costs, because the wood in one log may equal the wood in 2 or 3 logs from unspaced trees. Often, mill facilities are designed to process specific species and sizes of wood. Spacing can control and adjust the species composition and piece size uniformity of a stand in order to meet these needs. The goal is to ensure a healthy stand. Spacing helps achieve this goal in several ways. Spacing improves the stand's overall health by removing diseased and defective trees. Improved health also makes the stand more resilient to insects and disease. By removing surplus trees, access for recreation activities, wildlife, and cattle grazing is increased. The reduction in trees that results from spacing improves wildlife forage by allowing more sunlight to reach the forest floor, thus maintaining or enhancing plant and animal diversity. Now let's review the main points of Part 2, the benefits of spacing. Spacing promotes fast growth of desirable trees. Spacing reduces time until harvesting. Spacing develops trees of uniform size and shape. This means a reduction in logging and sawmilling costs. Spacing helps keep the stand healthy. Spacing encourages diversity of plant and animal life. Being a professional spacer means that you know exactly which tool to use for each job, and you know how to properly maintain your tools for optimum safety and performance. Juvenile spacing can be done using chemicals, machinery, hand tools, and power tools. However, power tools are used the most widely. Brush or clearing saws, long-handled circular saws, and chainsaws are the most commonly used power tools. By this time, you should have already received some hands-on training or instruction with both these saws. Which saw you'll use depends on site conditions and the size of trees to be cut. If you're working in rough terrain and heavy slash, then use the chainsaw. The chainsaw has been widely used on the coast because of the larger stem size, steep terrain, and heavy underbrush. It's best when cutting large stems over 7 centimeters or 3 inches. The brush saw has been used effectively on many interior locations. It should be used on flat to gently sloping terrain with low amounts of slash. Average tree size should be smaller than 7 centimeters in diameter or 3 inches and should not exceed 16 centimeters or 6 inches. Brush saws are safer than chainsaws because the saw kickbacks are away from the operator, and the harness system doesn't allow the operator's hands or feet to contact the blade. Both chainsaws and brush saws require thorough knowledge to be used efficiently, so you should know all aspects of your power tool before you use it. Read the owner's manuals or ask your supervisor for operational videos supplied by most manufacturers. Since you'll be operating these power tools continuously for up to 8 hours a day, you need these tools to operate efficiently. Each of the saws relies on certain techniques to maximize the performance of both operator and machine. Remember, lost production time means lost pay. Let's talk more specifically about the chainsaw. Before your day begins, do a thorough check of your chainsaw. Always check the saw before you carry it to the site. You could save yourself a 20 to 30 minute hike back to the truck. Check to make sure that the air filter is free of dirt. Oil and gas caps have no cracks. Nuts and bolts are tight, and the handlebar is secure. Next, check that the chain is sharp and under proper tension. There's more than one reason for doing this. Not only will it speed up production, but it will also increase your personal safety. If you need to sharpen the chain, wear gloves to avoid skinning your knuckles. Curl the file tang completely around, or preferably attach a handle to prevent puncture wounds to your body while working. If you work with a dull chain, you increase the hazard of saw kickbacks, a common cause of injury and death. You'll need to sharpen the chain several times a day. Now, check to see that the saw will start. Place it on solid ground with the bar and chain free of obstructions. Then steady the saw by placing your foot in the rear hand grip and holding the front handle firmly with one hand. In heavy brush or slash, hold the back handle between your legs. When the saw is idling, make sure the chain is stopped. Don't rest or attempt to adjust an idling saw on your leg or knee. It's also important to check the chain brake several times a day to ensure that it's working properly. Now that you're sure the saw is working properly, let's move on to the site. When you carry a chainsaw, the motor must be off. Point the bar behind you with the muffler away from your body. Don't carry the saw on your shoulder because its falling dogs can cause injury if you slip. If you lose your balance and are about to fall, throw the saw aside. It's hard to do that if you're balancing the saw on your shoulder. When walking, stay 3 meters behind the person in front of you and warn those behind you of hazards on the footpath. To operate the saw, make sure you always keep a firm grip on the front and rear handles. Use the proper grip. Thumb under the front saw grip, the rest of the hand over the top of the grip. If you don't hold the saw properly, a kickback can push it out of your grip and your hand could come in contact with the chain. Because of improper handling, saw kickbacks are a common cause of injury and death. A kickback can occur if the nose of the bar comes in contact with a solid object while you're cutting, another tree for example. A kickback is the reaction of the saw and bar to the forward and downward motion of the saw chain along the top and first part of the bar nose. Now, hold the saw close to your body. You'll get tired less easily and have greater control over the saw. If you hold the saw with your arms outstretched, you'll have less control, and that's dangerous. Keep your saw below shoulder level. Don't cut directly in front of you, but work off to your side. And never attempt to operate the saw with one hand. Let the chainsaw do the work. Don't force the saw through the cut. Always watch where you're cutting. Keep your eyes on the saw bar, especially the tip of the bar at all times. Be aware of the downward or outward path of the saw after the tree is cut, and keep your legs clear. When cutting stems under tension, watch for springbacks and be prepared to deflect the energy of the saw. Now let's talk about the brush saw. Like the chainsaw, the brush saw must be maintained and checked every day before you take it onto the site. With the brush saw, you should also check for cracks in the blade or the guard. Make sure the motor is off when working close to the blade. The proper blade should be tightly attached to the shaft with the lock nut, but don't over-tighten it. Lightly tap the blade. If you hear a ring, you'll know the blade is good. If you hear a dull thud, the blade is cracked and should not be used. Keep your blade sharp to maintain production, avoid kickbacks, and save yourself from fatigue and your saw from excessive wear. Set the teeth daily and sharpen after each fill-up. Once you're at the site, top up the gas tank to allow the saw to be properly balanced while you're in the harness. Before starting, make sure there are no obstructions near the blade. Your comfort is your major concern. You'll be supporting a 25-pound brush saw for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Wear the harness so that there's about 10 centimeters or 4 inches from your hip bone to the base of the attachment hook. The hook should be in line with the seam of your pants. Adjust the handles to suit yourself, making sure you're comfortable and your posture is good. Adjust the harness so there's even pressure on both your shoulders. When you stand squarely on your feet with the gas tank full, the blade should be directly in front of your feet, and the saw should hang freely. The harness has a quick release buckle in case of emergency. To start, put on the choke and pull the cord. Adjust the idling speed so that the blade doesn't rotate at idle. When you carry the saw, use the harness, not the arms. To minimize back pain, keep your legs apart for good balance. While you're cutting, keep the saw at maximum revolutions. This way you'll get clean, complete cuts. By using your legs and hips in smooth sweeping movements, you'll control the saw. Let the saw do the work. You'll cut the fastest if you use the 4 o'clock sector of the blade. If you're cutting close to other trees or rocks, the softer action in the 8 to 11 sector should be used. Avoid using the 12 to 3 sector, as this is where the risk of throw is greatest. Your operator's manual will give you proper directional felling techniques. It'll show you how to work safely, maintain production, and keep the working area clear. If a short stick becomes jammed between your blade guard and blade, first place the saw on a stump and try moving the blade backwards. If this doesn't work, shut the saw off and remove the stick by hand. Work in a systematic manner, using slopes to your advantage. Always cut across slopes when working uphill. Maintain a minimum working clearance from your coworkers of 2 tree heights apart, down to a minimum 10 meters or 33 feet. When you need to talk with a coworker, always make sure that he can easily see you coming. Make sure you follow all daily and weekly maintenance procedures suggested by the equipment supplier. Simple practice will maintain your production level and therefore your income level. Let's review the main points of Part 3, Tools for the Job. The two most common power tools used in spacing are the chainsaw and the brush saw. Proper maintenance is essential. Know your saw for safe and efficient operation. As a professional spacer, your goal is to work effectively, efficiently, and safely. Adopting the safety-first attitude means that you'll avoid injury and income loss for you and your family. The two most fundamental aspects of on-the-job safety are safety clothing and safety equipment. As a spacer, it's important that you use safe methods in every one of your activities, working the safe way every day. You'll be required to wear all the safety equipment necessary to protect yourself and your livelihood. First item, the hard hat. Hard hats in good condition must be worn at all times while spacing. An approved hearing protection device must be worn. Although both plug and muff types are acceptable, the muff type, which can be attached to a hard hat, is better because it protects the entire ear. It'll protect you from hearing loss and from injury. You've probably noticed the eye protection that spacers must wear. This is the type usually worn, the screen visor. It protects the eyes from protruding branches and another danger, flying wood chips. The screen of your visor should be worn in the down position, not only when you're actively working, but also when you're walking through the bush. It would be fairly easy to spot any of these crew members, even in dense bush. They're dressed to be noticed. Brightly colored shirts, brightly colored vests. Even when out of sight, this spacer can alert others, if necessary, with the whistle he carries within easy reach. It may be his only means of getting help if he gets injured. Your eyes are vulnerable, your ears are vulnerable, and so is one other part of your body, your hands. They need protection from punctures, scrapes, and irritation. It's good to remember that leather gloves become very smooth and slippery when wet. You should replace them with a rougher textured glove. Approved leg protective devices must be worn by all chainsaw operators. You'll get the best protection from pads sewn right into your pants. These pads will protect you from groin to ankle. Here's an important item no spacer should be without when cutting trees. Inside this sealed package are a couple of compress dressings, or pressure bandages, which must be carried by all spacers. A pouch attached to your belt or suspenders is good for carrying these first aid dressings. No pouch? Carry the sealed first aid bandages in your shirt pocket so they'll be easy to reach. Carry a small first aid kit in case of small scrapes or cuts. These are no ordinary boots. When you're walking on logs or through debris, the right boots to wear are corked boots. These are vital in coastal regions because of wet, slippery conditions. Make sure your corks are sharp and replace dull or missing corks as soon as possible. And take extreme care when walking on rock with corked boots. Corks won't dig into the rock and will slide on the rock surface, endangering you and wearing down the corks. Boots made with protective materials save your feet from accidental saw cuts. If your boots have laces, make sure they're tied properly at all times to prevent tripping. Safety gear should be comfortable. When it's worn correctly and fits well, you'll be able to concentrate on your work without being distracted or irritated. The spacer's work environment is full of potential hazards. That means you'll need to maintain a good attitude towards your work and concentrate on the specific task you're undertaking. Before the work begins, all the hazards you may encounter will be emphasized at a safety meeting. Hazards such as snags and changing terrain will be pointed out on the site map. During the safety meeting, ask your supervisor what animals you'll be sharing the forest with. Bear, wood ticks, bees, and bugs should be considered. You should know how wildlife will affect you and how you can protect yourself. Some of the water sources you come across may be infected by the Giardia bug. a water parasite. It causes a stomach upset, sometimes called beaver fever. It's probably not a good idea to drink pond or river water. Chainsaw operators sometimes suffer from tendinitis, a common ailment that comes from using the saw for long periods of time. You can avoid tendinitis by strengthening your wrists before you begin spacing activities. Cold weather brings the threat of two other hazards: frostbite and hypothermia. Be aware of these dangers and the treatment for them if spacing in winter months. If you're not sure if something is hazardous, stop work and ask your supervisor. The tools used in spacing give their operators no second chances. Be fit for work every day. This means no drugs, alcohol, or late-night partying that may leave you impaired the next morning. When you're tired, accidents happen. Not feeling well? Got a personal problem that's troubling you? Tell your supervisor. If your attitude isn't right, or you're not happy with the work, your chances of having an accident are greatly increased. And nobody works alone. Every worker has a buddy to ensure help is immediate. All crew members must know who the first aid attendant is, where the attendant and the first aid kit are located, and the proper procedures to follow in case of an accident. There's been an accident, but his buddy is within hearing distance and gets help. And in the event of an accident, a spacer must inform the supervisor as soon as possible. Time is crucial. That's why well-marked stretcher trails should be cleared into hard-to-reach areas. Crew members evacuate the spacer out of the bush and onto the road. There's always a vehicle parked in an outward position to save valuable time. Be sure the vehicle is parked off to the side, as other crews may be working farther down the road. When evacuating the injured, remember, the only means of transport must not be removed from the site without first making sure all workers have stopped cutting. Let's get back to the site. If you come across any snags, they may be wildlife or danger trees. These trees will be marked with a wildlife tree sign or with a no-work zone around them. If the treatment site has been assessed for wildlife or danger trees, your supervisor will have a site map with the location of all the wildlife danger trees. Any danger trees will be removed by qualified snag fallers. You must also be aware of how strong winds, heavy snow, fog, or other severe weather conditions may reduce safety margins. Strong, gusty winds present problems with directional control of cut trees. Fog restricts visibility. Heavy snow hampers movement and places potentially dangerous loads on treetops. Fire is a major hazard to the worker and forest. During fire season, your crew must be equipped for firefighting and observe all forest fire prevention regulations. Proper handling and safety around fuels is essential. In addition, worksite pollution must be prevented, so remove oil or fuel containers and other litter from the worksite. If you smoke, smoke before fueling to avoid igniting fuel that may have spilled on the ground or on clothing. When spacing during fire season, smoking is allowed only on the road or at designated fireproof areas, such as a landing. Be absolutely sure matches and cigarettes are out. This worker has filled the right containers for carrying fuel. They're jetpacks. Each jetpack must have a quick-release buckle to allow the pack to be removed quickly in an emergency. Plastic bottle containers are not suitable for carrying fuel because they're easily punctured. During fire season, you're required to carry a fully charged 225-gram chemical fire extinguisher and have a shovel at all major refueling sites. It pays to check your power tools for fire safety too. If you're using power tools during a period of high forest fire hazard, ensure that your saw muffler is in good condition. And make sure it has no holes and that the spark arrestor screen is properly in place and in good condition. And never refill a hot saw. Spilled gas may be ignited by hot engine parts. Let the saw cool down for a couple of minutes. A good practice is to open the gas cap on your chainsaw slightly and then fill the oil tank first. This will allow the saw to cool before you fill it with gas. After refueling, take a moment to look back over the areas you've cut to make sure no fires have started. And make sure you move your power tool at least 3 meters away from the fueling site before starting up again. Of course, to ensure safety, always use the right tools for the right job. In heavy slash and rough terrain, use the chainsaw. On flatter terrain, use the brush saw. Now let's review some of the most important aspects of Part 4, Safety First. First, dress for safety. Hard hat, ear protectors, visor, the right gloves, brightly colored vest or shirt, and padded pants. Remember to pack your bandages and whistle. Wear corked boots. Work for safety. Know the location of potential hazards, the dangerous wildlife in the area. Take precautions around fuel and protect against forest fire. Operate your tools safely. The right tool used the safe way. As a spacer, you're an integral part of a forest management team. Effective and efficient spacing and your own paycheck depends upon a high degree of organization and clearly outlined areas of responsibility for each member of the team. Ultimately, you're working for this person, the contractor. Most spacing projects are undertaken by contractors, independent business people working for whoever is responsible for managing the forest. It could be a private forest company or a municipality, provincial government, or even a private individual. While the contractor hires the crew, the contractor cannot always be on site, so instructions are passed to crew members through an on-site supervisor. The supervisor has many responsibilities. One of the most important of these is the actual planning of the spacing operation. The supervisor determines the boundary lines and checks out the area for potential dangers. It might be a windfall, a hazardous tree, or a snag like this, which a qualified Ministry of Forests expert will assess for stability. The supervisor also lays out the work areas, pointing out no treatment and no work zones where no spacing is to be done. Your supervisor will also mark trails for easiest access and record them on the site map. A buffer strip is sometimes left along main roads for aesthetic reasons or for wildlife protection. Movement corridors allow wildlife to travel freely from one area to another or to easily access water. The no-treatment zones along streams allow trees to maintain water temperature by providing shade. Streamside soil stability is also assisted by living tree root systems. Not all dead or deteriorating trees are unwelcome in the area to be spaced. These wildlife trees provide nesting, feeding, roosting, shelter, and overwintering for a wide variety of birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. Wildlife trees will be designated sound or unsound to work around. All unsound trees will have a no-work zone. You must stay outside these no-work zones. If the treatment site has not been assessed for wildlife danger trees, contact your supervisor. By the time the supervisor gathers you all together for the crew pre-work conference, the site itself will have been designated and the areas to be worked will have been organized. The work is divided into strips approximately 60 meters or 200 feet wide. Each strip has 2 spacers. Each spacer starts from the outside boundary and works towards the center of the strip. Once they reach the center, they turn back to the boundary. This strip approach is the safest and most productive approach to spacing, allowing individuals to remain at least 2 tree lengths away from each other. It's important to note that planning allows each strip to be worked by 2 spacers. This buddy system ensures that there's frequent visual contact between co-workers. We demonstrated the importance of this system in the previous section, Safety First. Help is never far away in an emergency situation. One of the topics which may be discussed during the crew pre-work conference is the area's slash removal zones. Your work creates unwanted cuttings. Any road, road bank, stream, ditch, or fire guard is considered a slash removal zone. The slash in these particular areas will be removed and redistributed into a space stand nearby. These are the kinds of subjects that will be discussed before any work begins at the pre-work conference held by the supervisor. Site requirements, contract specifications, and work quality will be explained and a review of safety procedures will be included in discussions. During the pre-work conference, one of the most important topics will be the identification of crop trees, the trees that you'll leave during the spacing procedure. These trees will differ from location to location. We'll discuss how you'll identify specific trees in the next section. Now let's review the most important elements of Part 5, teamwork and planning. You're directly responsible to the on-site supervisor. Problems or questions? See your supervisor. The site's layout will be planned with the buddy system as an important priority. At the crew pre-work conference, you should receive information on site layout, contract specifications, and safety. Identification of crop trees includes familiarizing yourself with many important conifers and hardwoods. In this section, we'll begin by outlining some of the most important of the coastal and interior conifer species. Then we'll look closely at some of the major tree diseases you'll encounter. Finally, we'll look at the characteristics used to select crop trees. As a professional spacer, you must be able to determine what is a crop tree and what is not. Once you learn this skill, you'll be ready to learn which is the best crop tree to keep. On the coast, the common species include Douglas fir, western hemlock, western white pine, amabilis fir, and western red cedar. The 1-inch Douglas fir needles are soft, flat, and stand out from around the stem. It's easy to identify the western hemlock. The leader or very top of the tree always droops. Needles are about a ½ inch shorter than Douglas fir and are usually uneven in length. On the underside, 2 parallel white bands run the full length of the needle. The western white pine has long 2 to 4 inch needles found in bundles of 5. Each needle has distinctive, finely toothed edges. Here's another needle tree, the amabilis fir. Its needles are usually less than 1 inch long and appear in 3 rows along the branch. Look closely. Those on the top of the branch point forward. Western red cedar has distinctive, scale-like flattened leaves, arranged in a fan-like configuration. Some of the major commercial tree species found in BC's interior include the lodgepole pine, white spruce, subalpine fir, western larch, and interior Douglas fir. Here are some distinguishing features. The lodgepole pine. Lodgepole needles are 1 to 3 inches long and are grouped in pairs. The white spruce. White spruce needles are about 1 inch long and are stiff and very sharp. You can spot a subalpine fir by its branches. The needles on the branches tend to curl upwards and are about 1 inch long and rounded with a notch tip. The western larch loses its needles in the fall and may even appear to be dead. However, like hardwoods, new needles will form again in the spring. Western larch needles are arranged spirally in clusters of 16 to 30 on short spurs. The interior Douglas fir has similar characteristics to the coastal Douglas fir. The needles are about 1 inch long, soft, flat, and stand out from around the stem. No forest is made up only of conifers. Deciduous trees, birch, poplar, red alder, and others must also be considered. If unsure of local species, ask your supervisor or check with a pocket guide on tree identification. As a spacer, you also need to be aware of the different types of natural crop damage. Because every site is different, your supervisor will tell you how to identify and deal with problems at your particular site. Root diseases affect trees of any age or species and are caused by decay fungi entering the tree, gradually killing the root system and eventually the tree. Color is the key. A healthy tree is green. One that is diseased looks yellow. Other symptoms are reduced leader growth and distressed cone crops. Slightly infected areas of root rot could be treated by leaving more resistant tree species around the infection center or by clearing a 3 to 5 meter buffer area around the infected trees. Dwarf mistletoes are parasites which feed off a tree's moisture and nutrients. You can easily recognize their presence by swollen stems and branches. A large number of trees infected with mistletoe die early. Others have low wood quality and volume, making them unsuitable for harvest. One of the most destructive forest diseases you'll come across is tree rust. Rust infections are recognized by the discoloration, swelling, and blistering they cause on the bark, stem, and branches of trees. They weaken and eventually kill the tree. Your supervisor will instruct you to remove as many of the infected trees as possible so that other healthy species can grow. Only adjust spacing if your supervisor tells you to. Trees also get damaged by wildlife. Bears, porcupines, squirrels, and other animals can all leave their mark. You must be able to spot and remove these trees as well, but only if major tree damage has occurred. The tree characteristics used to select crop trees will vary from location to location. Your supervisor will identify the appropriate crop tree characteristics in every instance, but not every suitable crop tree will be left untouched. Only trees with certain characteristics will be left when spacing is done. You'll choose the trees of good form and vigor. Trees that meet inter-tree distance specifications. Trees that have a large stem diameter at breast height. And trees that have straight stems. This crooked tree won't make the grade. Neither will a tree that's leaning or disfigured in any way. You'll choose trees that have firm root systems. That would eliminate this tree because the roots are exposed. Trees with exposed roots or trees which are growing in rotting material can easily be toppled by wind. Leave the crop trees with healthy-looking crowns and no multiple tops. You'll also save crop trees without blemishes, scars, or frost cracks in the bark, and the ones that appear free of insect and disease damage. If this isn't possible, keep the least damaged trees closest to the target inter-tree distance from healthy crop trees. You'll hear the terms dominant and co-dominant. Dominant trees are those that reach above the others to receive sunlight from above and from the side. Co-dominant trees are not quite as tall and receive sunlight mostly from above. These dominant and co-dominant trees will eventually have the largest stem diameters. Let's quickly review the main points we've covered in Part 6, the trees. Familiarize yourself with major crop tree species: coastal, Douglas fir, western hemlock, western white pine, amabilis fir, and western red cedar. Interior, lodgepole pine, white spruce, subalpine fir, western larch, and interior Douglas fir. The main diseases you'll encounter are dwarf mistletoes, tree rusts, and a variety of root diseases. There may also be tree damage caused by wildlife. Be familiar with all the characteristics of a good crop tree: firm root system, large diameter, no stem or branch damage, straight stem, healthy green foliage, preferred species, leader straight and unbroken. This stand of uniform high-yield crop trees didn't always look this way. Spacing and other silviculture practices made the difference. Every tree you see in this stand is a crop tree, trees left purposely on the site to grow to maturity. Originally, the stand included many other trees. There are crop trees in this stand too. The difference is this stand has not yet been spaced, so crop trees coexist with many other kinds of trees that are undesirable. As a spacer, it'll be up to you to decide which trees will be crop trees and which trees will be removed. You'll be making critical decisions continually while you're working. The future of a stand of timber, quite literally, depends on you. In this section, you'll develop your decision-making process for selecting crop trees. Of course, your main concern is to leave the very best crop trees on your site. The characteristics of the site itself will determine the degree of spacing required. The capacity of every site to support tree growth is different. The risk of tree loss at every site differs as well. On one site, the decision to leave 500 stems per hectare may be correct, but on a site that's exposed to potential severe wind damage, it may be wise to leave several hundred more trees to ensure a fully stocked stand at maturity. Your supervisor will give you all the information necessary during the pre-work conference to make good spacing decisions. Let's get to work. Since every stand contains many potential crop trees, you must decide which ones are the best at the predetermined spacing distance. It may be hard to decide where to begin, but as you gain experience, you'll be able to make correct decisions quickly. The goal is to leave the largest, best-formed tree at the proper spacing. When you're on the job, you'll be constantly estimating the distance between trees. Normally, you'll be measuring inter-tree distance on a flat or horizontal plane. It's a bit more difficult on slopes because you must increase the distance between the trees to maintain a constant horizontal distance. It's just a matter of practice. Try to imagine a flat plane between the two crop trees. You'll also develop a system for picking the best crop trees. Once you've got a system, it'll be easy for you to modify it for the unique conditions of each site. Here's how to do it. For each site, there'll be an obvious characteristic which will decide whether a tree should be cut or left. Look at each tree for species, form, health, and location relative to other crop trees. Look at the whole tree and be familiar with local tree damage. After you've picked the first tree, you can start removing the trees around it. You may often find, as this spacer has, that you won't be able to see the next crop tree until you've actually cut part of the spacing distance. When you get close to the right distance, pick the best tree from 3 or 4 trees closest to the proper spacing. Now, remove the others from around it. Once you get going, you'll be able to easily use the crop trees you've already selected to determine the position of the next crop tree. You'll want to leave all high-quality trees that are close to the correct spacing. Never cut a good tree and leave a poor one because it's closer to the ideal spacing position. As a rule, if the desired spacing for the site is 4 meters, you can vary the spacing distance from 3 to 5 meters in order to select only the best trees. Just make sure that your spacing distances are not consistently too high or too low. Try to strike a balance over the entire treatment area. Once you've developed a system for ranking trees, keep it consistent. That means if you're viewing the tree from top to base, keep it that way. If the stand you're working in is very dense and you can't easily see the treetops, start your checklist from the bottom up. The easiest characteristic to see is, of course, the diameter of the tree. Choose trees with the largest diameter. Don't forget, the tree should be the correct species, and the rest of it has to be in good form and health. Suppressed trees, those that are weak, small, and living in the shadow of others, should always be cut in favor of larger, healthier trees. All trees over 1 meter tall that you haven't selected as leave trees should be cut. Look at the base of trees carefully to determine if it's growing in a good microsite. Is the tree growing out of a rotting log? That's no good, because it could easily be toppled by wind. In some cases, however, these trees may be your only choice for crop trees. Notice the tree's location. Trees growing on a knoll could have difficulty getting moisture and could also be toppled by wind. Trees growing on the edge of ravines can die from exposed roots. So survival odds are better for trees located in a small gully where they receive more moisture and their root system is better established. Examine the tree closely. Do the stem or branches have any damage? If the branches are broken or there's any sign of disease, the tree should be removed. Remember that crop damage will change from one site to another. If any of the tree's foliage is yellowing, you'll know the tree is diseased. Is the tree straight? These trees will yield desirable saw logs when ready to harvest. Trees with stem distortions such as sweeps, forks, and crooks should be cut. This tree has bad form. If the crown or leader is forked or broken, it should be removed. Here's a tree with a forked top. Let's look at a couple of trees using the decision-making process we've developed. First, correct spacing distance. Second, check the diameter. It's large. Third, is it the right species? Douglas fir is right for this site. Fourth, the microsite. It's good, no exposed roots. Fifth, check for any damage on stem or branches. No. Sixth, check the color. This one's good. It's a healthy dark green. Seventh, check the form. The body of the tree is okay, but the top is forked. so it's not the best choice. Let's look at its neighbor. We'll go through our decision-making process again. Diameter, large. Species, correct. Microsite, good. Stems and branches. This tree has some mammal damage, otherwise it's got good color, good form, and a straight leader. We'll look at it again if we don't find a better one. Here's another tree with poor form. Let's go through our decision-making process again. Diameter, large. Species, correct. Microsite, good. Stems and branches, good. Color, this tree's foliage is yellow. It should be removed. When you've evaluated the trees closest to your proper spacing distance, select the best one, remove the others, and move on. On every site, the mix of trees is different. You'll be informed of the most desirable species for the site you're working on, and will keep it in mind as you make your decisions. If you come across a hemlock and Douglas fir with identical characteristics in a designated Douglas fir area, then you'll select the preferred species, the Douglas fir. Again, this will be clearly stated at the pre-work conference. But in the same area, if one is obviously better than the other, save the best one. In this case, the hemlock. If you're not sure how to identify the local species, ask your supervisor. If your supervisor hasn't told you how much larger the next preferred species must be before you leave it, then use a rule of thumb. 30% larger for a leaf tree. Ask your supervisor what the contract requires. Now let's review the basic elements in Part 7, the decision-making process. What is the spacing distance for this site? Does the tree have a large diameter compared to the trees close to it? Is it the preferred species for this site? Is it growing in a good microsite? Is there damage or disease in the stem or branches? Is the color of the foliage a healthy green? Does the tree have a good straight form? Is the leader straight and unbroken? A spacing crew is hard at work. To a newcomer, the work can appear somewhat random and unorganized, but appearances can be deceiving. No project is undertaken without advanced planning. This guarantees the activity of each crew member is effective and efficient. The future of the forest and the size of the spacer's paycheck depends on a professional attitude, on professional performance. Make no mistake, you are a professional. When you begin your spacing activities, you'll be expected to conduct yourself in a professional manner. As a crew member, you'll be expected to work hard, but you'll also be expected to work safely. It's safety first, whether it's the tools you use, the clothes you wear, or the way in which you do the job itself. It's all part of a continual program of safety. On most projects, the spacer is paid by the number of hectares which have been satisfactorily spaced. This is a hectare, about the size of 2 football fields. As we mentioned before, doing the job begins with planning the job. The work is not done on a random basis, but through a strip approach. Planning includes designating work areas and no treatment areas. Throughout the presentation, you've seen spacers at work with their saws. Let's examine just how the cutting work is done. When on a slope, always work uphill. This way, trees won't slide down and injure you. On flat terrain, use wind direction to assist in direction falling. You may have to delimb to get to the tree which will be cut. Be careful not to cut into the leaf tree. This will leave wounds, open invitations for insects and disease. Cut only the branches that prevent access to the main stem. Cut branches from the highest to lowest and as close to the stem as possible. Never cut backhand from lowest to highest. You'll cut some trees that are over 10 centimeters or 4 inches wide, or that require directional control. Use an undercut of 1/3 the diameter and then a back cut. Pushing every tree over is not required and may lead to severe back injury. For trees under 10 centimeters or 4 inches wide, use a single cut all the way through. Do not fall a tree when another person is in the area. When cutting during winter, take extra care. Frozen wood is brittle. Branches and tops may break off and fly back unexpectedly. Heavy snow on branches may make directional felling more difficult. When spacing small diameter trees, cut at a small angle to allow the tree to slide off the stump in a desired direction. 30 degrees from the horizontal is the maximum angle to use. The greater the angle, the harder you have to work. Greater angles also mean poor directional control and potentially dangerous stumps with sharp points. This leaning tree can be dealt with effectively and safely through a blocking down technique. Watch. The spacer cuts the tree into long blocks. Notice the cut on the underside, which leaves a hinge of wood on the top edge. Be careful when using this blocking down technique on uneven ground. The cut section can rise and strike you. On larger trees, you may want to put a notch on the top side before starting the undercut. When the tree drops, it will be hinged forward to a distance equal to the height of the cut and the ground. If hardwoods have to be cut, cut the smaller trees. Larger hardwoods are often difficult and hazardous to fall because of their branching structure and brittle stems. Falling these large trees may also damage crop trees. Here's the best method to use. Girdle the stem with 2 parallel saw cuts. Don't make them too deep, they just have to break the cambium, the layer just under the bark. Cutting any deeper could affect the tree's stability. And do not girdle trees within 1 tree length of a trail designated on the area map or a traveled road. These trees will eventually break off and may endanger the worker using the road. The brush saw has many uses. Different blade positions are used to cut different sizes of tree. Trees 3 to 7 centimeters, or 1 to 3 inches in diameter, require just 1 cut, as you see here. Use the 4 o'clock part of the blade for the fastest cutting. But when there's danger of striking other trees or rocks, use the 8 to 11 o'clock part of the blade. Before cutting a larger tree, take a look at the way the tree is leaning. Make a shallow notch on the felling side, and then complete the cut from the other side. You'll learn how to direct the fall of the tree by the type of cut you use. This will increase your production and maintain a cleaner, safer work area. It's the same with either the chainsaw or brush saw. Cut the tree below the lowest live branch as close to the ground as possible. Make sure the stump angle is not greater than 30 degrees. These sharp stumps can be dangers for both workers and wildlife. Remove any live branches left below the cut, because the tree will continue to grow if any live branches are left. Be sure that all the trees you cut fall to the ground. Material that lies flat on the ground decays faster and allows for easier movement of wildlife and workers. Ask your supervisor if the contract requires that a maximum slash height be met. Hang-ups rub against crop trees and may cause breakage under heavy snow. Never leave a tree standing in a work area. It could fall unexpectedly and cause injury. Be sure your cuts are complete. This tree was cut, but still lives. A hinge was left. Hinge trees continue to grow and compete with the crop trees you've saved. Normally, a forked or double-topped tree like this one should be cut. But it's possible that after your evaluation, it may be considered a leave tree when no other options are available. Leave both stems wholly uncut to prevent disease entering a wound. Deciduous trees such as birch, poplar, and red alder may be present in the stand. Don't cut them if there are no crop trees underneath. Brush-type species must be cut, however, if they compete with any leave tree for soil nutrients. Always cut the brush first in order to provide easy access to the larger cut trees. By cutting the deciduous trees first, cut conifers can cover the deciduous stump, shade it, and reduce the amount of resprouting. This tree is damaged, but otherwise healthy. But it will be saved. Why? It's not diseased, and as you can see, it's the only one in the clearing. At the edge of any clearing, along roads or old skid trails, temporarily decrease the inter-tree distance to 1/2 of the average spacing for the area to compensate for trees missing in the opening. Ask yourself, how many trees could the opening support at the appropriate spacing distance? This is the number of additional crop trees that you should leave. Your supervisor will inform you about slash levels and distribution. In some cases, slash is piled to create shelter for wildlife. In all cases, slash should be removed from streams, drainage ditches, and roads. Let's review the main points of Part 8, How to Cut. Know the proper cutting techniques for small and large trees using both the chainsaw and brush saw. Be familiar with blocking down and girdling techniques. When cutting, avoid leaving saw cuts in crop trees, stumps too high, sharp stump angles, live branches below the cut, hinged trees, and trees leaning on crop trees. The work is done, but before the contractor gets paid, the site is inspected. Quality checking is needed to develop the best possible future forest, to ensure the work is done properly, and to ensure money is wisely spent. Spacing faults can result in pay reductions to the contractor or can require reworking the area. In either case, this will affect the amount of money that is paid to the individual spacer. The forest manager can't closely inspect the entire area, so a series of plots is established evenly across the site, no less than 1 plot per hectare. A few mistakes may seem unimportant, but if these mistakes fall into the sample plot, it could mean a reduction in overall quality and possibly a reduction in the amount the forest manager is willing to pay. Here are some common faults. Leaving stumps that are too high or cut on too sharp an angle, making a dangerous point. Leaving green branches below the cut. These can grow into another stem. Leaving too few or too many crop trees, small trees that are missed. Leaving one tree hung up on another. Leaving a felled tree attached to the stump by a hinge. Unsatisfactory slash disposal. Felled trees in streams, lakes, on buffer strips or roads. Damage to crop trees, including saw nicks and broken tops. Poor selection of crop trees, including wrong species and damaged or badly formed trees. Your supervisor will check the quality of your work frequently. Therefore, you should check your own work. You'll only make top money if you do a good job. To check your work, a circular plot is established using a plot cord, usually 5.64 meters on the coast, 3.99 meters in the interior. Most workers carry a short cord to measure the distance of their plots. To arrive at the number of leaf trees per hectare, here's the equation to use. Count all the leaf trees in the plot. Multiply this total by 100 for the 5.64 meter radius plot, and by 200 for the 3.99 radius plot. Checking for quality is really not a final step. It should be a constant activity that you as a professional spacer undertake during each and every activity described in this video. It helps ensure a valuable future forest and a significant source of income, both for our province and for you. Throughout this video, you've seen professional spacers at work. Now it's time for you to use the skills you've seen demonstrated. Let's go over what you've learned. You've seen the role you play in BC's forest industry, the benefits of juvenile spacing, the tools you'll use for the job, proper safety awareness, the role of teamwork and planning in juvenile spacing, tree identification and the decision-making process, how to properly cut the trees you're felling, and how to check for quality as you do your job. Every aspect of your job as a professional spacer is important. You're part of a team of forestry professionals who are working together for a common goal. The goal of producing early maturing, high-yielding, healthy stands that meet a variety of resource uses.